Hey friends, and welcome back to the 𝐚𝐭 Homestead. I'm 𝐚𝐭. Come on in and welcome into my kitchen because today we are going to be doing some food preservation via freeze drying. I have my freeze dryer running right now. We're also going to be making some sourdough bread, canning beans, and I'm going to show you what we are freeze drying, which is mixed vegetables, how to rehydrate those and make a delicious cast iron dinner. So today is the prep day. I'm going to show you what I'm doing to get everything ready, and then tomorrow we are going to be putting everything together because sourdough, once you feed it, you got to let your sourdough starter rise. Freeze drying takes around 18 to 20 plus hours depending on the temperature of your house and how much moisture is in the food. It is currently the afternoon and I'm starting my batch of freeze drying. I've learned afternoon is the best. If I start in the morning, I will wake up to my freeze dryer in the middle of the night. Canning the beans, we'll be hydrating our beans tonight and let them soak for 12 hours and then we'll can them up tomorrow. So let's get started. In here, I have 20 pounds of mixed vegetables. It's green beans, carrots, corn, and peas, which I love. I get this in bulk from Azure, and then I will freeze dry it and use it in recipes. It's so easy to just mix and make up. So what I'm going to be doing is just loading these trays with the mixed vegetables. So the freeze dryer runs for 15 minutes to cool down, and then I just, in the meantime, get my trays ready. You don't want your trays to be overloaded. You want one layer of veggies or fruits, wherever you're doing. You don't want them to be over the lip if you can help it. So this is about perfect. And our second tray is done. I'm just working in a line right here. Once all these are done, we're going to head over to the freeze dryer and put them in. Third tray, and now we're on to our last. All of our trays are done. Let's go to the freeze dryer and put them in. I'm just gonna open this up and put in the trays. We have 2 more steps. We just have to press continue here and then make sure our drain valve is closed. And then these will probably, I'm gonna say 18 to 20 hours for the vegetables. This is closed, that's good. Now the next step is load food into freeze dryer, close drain valve, which we know it's closed. Do not mix frozen with non-frozen food. All those were frozen, and we just click continue. And now it freezes. Our next prep is super simple. It's my sourdough starter, and I haven't used it for a while, so it has some liquid on the top, which is called the hooch. So I'm going to stir that in, add in my flour and my water. So I have 1 cup flour, 1 cup water, and I do measuring, but I basically go on the consistency. I like a pancake type batter consistency, and that's what's worked for me. So we're just going to stir this. And then put on the funnel. Pour in our flour. And we are going to stir that up. There's some air bubbles from the flour, so I'm just going to get those out. So it's a little runny. I'm actually going to put in some more flour, because like I said, I'm looking for a bit more of a thicker texture than this. But my sourdough starter, before I even fed it, was a little runny from my last time. So that is why. So your sourdough starter can survive if you overfeed it. It cannot survive if you underfeed it. So keep that in mind if you have a sourdough starter. I love my sourdough starter. It may be a mess and make my jars messy, but it makes the most delicious breads. It's a super happy starter. Ooh, we got a big chunk coming off right there. All right, this is more the texture that I'm looking for, not super runny, but like a nice pancake texture. Oh, this is beautiful. All right, so I am going to put this into a warm place, and it is going to rise. I am timing this so tonight when we go to put our beans to soak, we will also have an active starter because it takes a little bit for your starter after you feed it to get active and bubbly. So that is what I want because I am going to make sourdough English muffin bread. So tonight is going to be perfect. I already see some bubbles on here, so I'm gonna let this rise and I will see you guys tonight to soak the beans and make up our dough for our sourdough bread. Good morning, friends. Welcome back to the kitchen. It is the next day and we are going to be canning some beans and baking some bread. Let me show you the prep work that we did to get here.
It took a few hours for my sourdough starter to get active and bubbly after we fed it with flour and water. It sat by the fireplace for a few hours. Then later that night, I mixed the sourdough starter with flour and water. So a 1/2 cup sourdough starter to 2 cups flour and 1 cup water. I do 2 separate bowls for this. I just find that it mixes better instead of doubling the batch into 1 bowl. The consistency turns out better and I find that the loaves just overall turn out better. So that's why I do this instead of just doing a double batch, but it is the easiest sourdough bread recipe that you can do, and it's English muffin and it tastes so good and it doesn't have an overwhelming sourdough taste because it doesn't ferment for long. And also that night I covered some beans with water. In order to can beans, I found that it's best to let them soak overnight. You can do the method of cooking them before you can them, but I found this method to be better and it's so easy. Just prep the beans the night before, and then during the middle of the night the freeze dryer started beeping. Probably around 4 it was done. This went by super fast. There just wasn't much moisture in these vegetables, so I ended up getting up and checking on the freeze dryer. I took out the vegetables and looked at them inside the freeze dryer and they looked done. And then I took them over to my table in my kitchen, and that is where I started to prep them, aka put them into Mylar bags. These Mylar bags came from Harvest Right when I got my freeze dryer, and I also used the oxygen absorbers that came with the freeze dryer as well. They are the perfect size for the projects that I do in my freeze dryer. Usually it's about 1 bag to 2 trays. That's what I found. So I just loaded those up with my vegetables. You can even see my bread in the back covered. And then I used my heat clamp to clamp together the Mylar bags to seal them. And this clamper also came with my Harvest Right freeze dryer, but you can find those on Amazon. And then what I did after I clamped those together, I vacuum sealed the oxygen absorbers, which is so important. You want to do this whenever you open oxygen absorbers. You don't want to leave them open because obviously they're going to absorb the oxygen. So you want to vacuum seal them so then you can reuse them. And then I checked on my beans and they were soaked. So then I decided it was time to start getting everything ready to can and to bake our bread.
So now that we have everything ready, we did our freeze dryer, we got everything out of there. Let's get our beans ready to be canned. I have my canner getting ready to go. Has 2 to 3 inches of water warming up, and we're just gonna fill some pints with our soaked beans and get them in the canner.
When canning beans, the best way to do it is to soak the beans overnight, but then after soaking, you will drain the beans and then fill up another pot with water, cover the beans, and that is what I'm doing here, is just covering the beans. I have to use 2 different pots because my 1 pot doesn't have enough room for all of the beans that I'm doing, and then you just cover them with water and let them boil for 30 additional minutes. While the beans were boiling, I used this as time to prepare the sourdough English muffin bread, and all that takes is adding some honey. You can do more or less if you want it sweet or not sweet. And then I add in some salt, and then this time I used baking powder. So this is non-aluminum, non-metal baking powder instead of baking soda. So you can change out baking soda, baking powder. I do in my kitchen. It is 1 teaspoon of baking soda equals 3 teaspoons of baking powder, and I have a lot of baking powder, so that's what I've been doing in my recipes lately. And then I just use my hand to mix up the loaves and place them in greased pans. And you want to make sure to grease those pans. You will be sad if you put in dough to a non-greased bread pan because it will be a mess after it's cooked and come out of the oven. I love this recipe so much, and I originally made this into a loaf and took a sourdough actual English muffin recipe that made individual English muffins, and instead of doing that like we've done in my other previous preservation day video, I was like, man, this is kind of a hassle. I just want to make the bread. So that's what I did, is I just was like, okay, well, I'm just gonna bake it and see how it turns out. And it turned out great. So I put the loaves in the oven and then went back to check on my beans.
The beans have now boiled for 30 minutes. So now we are going to just put beans into the pint jars. We're gonna leave a 1-inch headspace, and we will be putting in a ½ teaspoon of pickling salt into the jars. This is optional, but it does give the beans some taste. So it's not just, you know, plain beans. You got some salt in there. Ooh, glad I did not put this in. This is pickling lime. I use this to water glass eggs. That was a close one. Now I have my pickling and canning salt. Again, a ½ teaspoon per pint, 1 teaspoon if you're doing a quart. For beans, I like to do pints because I feel like that is what the recipes usually call for. So I am just going to scoop beans into this jar. I'm just using a ladle, and you will put the beans in here and then you will cover with cooking water. So I think I got a few too many beans in there. Actually, no, this is perfect. I did perfect. So headspace is the distance from the top of the jar to the bottom. I'm trying to just get some cooking water. And I'm gonna bring you guys over here so you can see up close what I'm doing. So I have my beans in the jar. This is about a 1-inch headspace. You can measure, so this is the inch right here. So I just put it in, goes to the top of the liquid. It's a 1-inch, but I'm gonna go around the sides like this. This gets all the air bubbles out. You don't wanna have air bubbles trapped in there, because then things couldn't cook evenly, and then you don't have the right headspace. And then I remeasure, and I need just a little bit more liquid, just a little. That should be perfect. Yep, so that is a 1-inch headspace. So I just use vinegar, and I wipe around the rim. It's important to wipe around the rim of the jars because you don't want anything like salt or any sort of residue to inhibit the seal with the lid. So now I'm gonna put the lid on, and then I'm gonna screw the lid on, only finger tight. So you don't wanna crank it with your wrists, only finger tight, because it needs to be able to vent in the canner. And now I'm just gonna put this into the canner and keep on canning up beans. We have our canner loaded with our jars, which I'm so excited about. Now we are going to put on our lid, just like that. And then my canner has a little arrow right here that I line up with this notch, and I'm going to tighten the opposite ends like this. Opposite ends tighten on my canner. Most important thing is to just follow the manual that came with your canner. It is so helpful. It has recipes in it. And to do just practice runs. I could have used extra space on the second rack for canned water, So that gives you an idea when you have extra space, you can can up some water. I don't personally need to, but just keep that idea. Also, if we would have done pints and quarts, you always use the time. They're gonna have different times. You always use the time that is the biggest. So pints is 75 minutes and quarts is 90 minutes. So if I would have had quarts in here, we would be canning this for 90 minutes instead of 75. So what I'm doing right now is just making sure that this space is even all around. And I just adjust accordingly until it is. Make sure all these are tight. You want this space to be the same all the way around the canner. So that is what I just did. Then you tighten down these bolts and then we put it on high and we'll wait until this starts venting. Our bread is finished. It's lightly brown on the top. I'm gonna get that out. Now I am going to clean up. It's a bit of a disaster in here. I had to go outside and chase down a chicken. It almost flew into one of the dogs' areas and it would have been so bad. So I'm just a disaster. And it's early, so just another day on the homestead. So I'm gonna get this cleaned up and we have bread to get out of the oven right now. Our bread is done. I'm gonna get it out and show you. This is literally the easiest sourdough bread ever. It's lightly browned on the top. It smells like English muffins. It smells so good.
While we were waiting for the canner to come up to pressure and start blowing off steam, I decided to blow off my own steam and go and clean. I find this so important whenever you're in the kitchen to take the opportunity to clean up. The kitchen can quickly become overwhelming and cluttered, and this has slowly become one of my favorite things I use to decompress is to just go and clean up my kitchen, whether that's doing dishes or at night wiping down the counters, making sure that the dishwasher's unloaded for the next day. It has seriously helped my mental health. I know I mentioned this in another video, my other food prep video, because it is just so important, I find, to have a clean kitchen. So whenever you are among these big projects, I would recommend to take the time whenever you find it in between one project to another to just clean up the mess as you go. It is so rewarding. So this is what I did while we were waiting for our canner.
There is now a steady stream of steam coming out. So we're gonna set the timer for 10 minutes, let it vent, and then we'll put on our weight. We still have a lot going on in the kitchen. We have a majority of it done. We got our bread done, our sourdough bread, and it smells so good. I know I already said that, but yum. We have our canner going right now for the beans, and then later we're gonna make some pot pie with the freeze-dried vegetables. I'm gonna show you how that works. And it has been crazy this morning. I woke up early to the freeze dryer. I had to step away while we were canning beans and go chase chickens. So that is what you guys did not see. And that is why I look, you know, like I'm homesteading, because I am. So I will see you guys here soon when we put the weight on the beans. The timer just went off, which means this has been venting for 10 minutes. So I'm gonna turn the timer off and I am going to put on my weight. So now we will start the timer once this does its first jiggle, once it gets up to pressure. So this is 15 pounds of pressure. The process of canning, you put it in, you put the lid on, you let it vent for 10 minutes, you put on your weight, and then we wait for that to jiggle. I'll show you guys what the jiggle looks like. And then after the first jiggle, that's when we start our timer for 75 minutes or whatever time you have for your canning recipe. That is the first jiggle. Our goal is to have that jiggle 1 to 4 times a minute. We do not want it to constantly jiggle. You will get used to this on your oven. I'm gonna turn down the heat until that only goes 1 to 4 times a minute. But it's at 15 pounds of pressure, which is good for me. But now we're gonna set the timer for 75 minutes. All right, we're now in business. The timer is up, so we're just gonna turn that off and then turn this off Let it come all the way down to 0. Then we'll take the weight off and then we'll take out our cans. But we did it. This gauge is down to 0. So now we're gonna take this off and let it sit for 2 minutes, and then we'll open this up and take out the cans. Bit of a dinner plan change up. I was planning to do the mixed veggies cast iron, but then I was looking in my fridge and I saw some bacon that I had left over, and I'm all about doing leftovers. So I'm actually gonna just make bacon and use the bread that we baked today and do like a breakfast sandwich because that sounds so good. So in the future, I'll do the cast iron veggies from freeze drying. That'll probably just be its own whole video so I can show you guys the process of rehydrating veggies and whatnot. But let's make some breakfast sandwiches from our sourdough bread. So delicious, and it sounds so good right now. I'm also so happy with how these turned out. These look absolutely amazing. All these pinto beans, yum. Here is the inside of the sourdough English muffin bread. It even smells like English muffins, and I'm telling you, this is so good. I'm gonna fry it in bacon grease. I'm gonna make my bacon, my eggs, and then fry up my bread, and then we can eat. All I did was cook the eggs in the sourdough bread in the bacon grease. I'm so happy I did this because I was able to use my leftovers so I didn't have to overwhelm my fridge with extra food. Okay, we just finished the bread, everything in bacon grease. This smells delicious, this looks delicious, and this is what I'm gonna have for dinner. Okay, it has been a long day preserving. I even streamed during this. So now I haven't eaten anything all day besides my sourdough brownies. Yum. So let's try. We got our bread, farm fresh eggs, farm fresh bacon. This tastes so good. It has definitely been a day on the homestead. I'm gonna go enjoy this. Thank you for canning with me, freeze drying with me, and baking bread with me. I appreciate you guys. Don't do anything a Gubba wouldn't do. Thank you for spending time here. All the links will be down in the description, and I will see you guys next time. Bye!